All right. Welcome, everybody. I say all right because um, I'm always happy and excited about doing this show. Welcome to this week's edition of Your Big Venture Zone. This is the show that's geared to Gen Z entrepreneurs and founders. And really, what we're about is we're here to support entrepreneurs, share ideas, strategies, and also provide a community for our younger generation to succeed in business and in life. It's really important. And our guest this week is Michael Braithwaite. Michael is president and CEO of Jack.org. Michael is passionate. He's a passionate and proven non-for-profit leader with more than 30 years of experience. So he started when he was 15. um, yeah, with more than 30 years of experience advancing social impact across the housing, the youth services sector. And as president and CEO of Jack.org, Michael brings deep expertise in organizational leadership and just there we go in organizational leadership, strategic implementation, fundraising, and community partnerships to help promote youth mental health outcomes across Canada. Not a small task. Michael is deeply committed to ensuring that every young person in Canada has access to mental health support that they need to thrive. And really, this show really supports that too. That's why I say it's about community and support in growing your business, because there's an old saying a friend of mine said: if you want a crash course in personal growth and mental health, start a business because you're going to bump up against.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? So Michael is really, big on mental health support that young people need to thrive. And he looks forward to collaborating with the Jack.org community of youth, donors, partners, and advocates to build a better future for our young people in Canada. And he joins us this week on the Big Venture Zone. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, David. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to get right into it because there's a lot to unpack and talk about today, and that is, my first question is, what is it about Jack.org that spoke to you to a point that you wanted to take on your leadership role? Because you're relatively new as the CEO and president. What is it about your organization that really, speaks to you?
Well, thanks for that question. So I'm about a year into my role at Jack.org. I'm not a big believer in titles either. I mean, what really drives Jack.org is not a president, CEO, but it's the young people that are behind it. And that speaks to why I'm here. I love the fact that our organization is for young people by young people. I say young people ages 13 to 29 that we work with. But I get frustrated sometimes in our system that, I think a lot of times we do the same things over and over again and expect different results, right? What I love about the approach at Jack.org was this organization born out of tragedy of Jack Windler losing his life by suicide. His dad, in his grief, looking at where are the gaps? What could we do differently? What failed Jack, or what could have changed that, and what could change things for others, more importantly, moving forward. And he looked at that early intervention prevention. I love that. I love that fact that we're not just doing the same thing. We're looking at a different approach to this. And if Jack.org does its job well with young people, how many hundreds of thousands of young people will not go into crisis around mental health, and how many fewer lives will be lost by suicide, the second leading cause of death for young people in Canada?
I was going to ask about the name. So because it's not your typical mental health organization name. So it's after, I guess, a young man who took his life. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so if you Jack Windler, who the organization is named after in 2010, he's a high achiever. So Jack was a high achiever, always did well with academics, was an athlete, star athlete. And when he went to Queen's University, he signs of mental unwellness started to present themselves, and Jack didn't know what it was. He was ashamed. He hid it from his family, his friends, as best he could. His family, again, he came from a close, supportive family. They didn't know. And so when he did pass by suicide, his family was shocked because they had no idea. And why were the gaps there? How could we identify this earlier before it got to that stage? And so his dad, who was, had been a longtime entrepreneur, had launched a lot of companies, been very successful, spent a couple of years researching to see, hey, is there a gap? And if there is one, who should step up to do that? And ultimately, he stepped up to do that and formed Jack.org in Jack's legacy. On the early intervention prevention piece, which was missing, right? Because our system is largely a crisis built system.
Yeah, yeah, they don't do anything until something happens. And you know what I heard in there too is like, like a upper middle class background, successful. Mental health doesn't know about economics or backgrounds. It really doesn't, right? So
No, of course, it affects us all, right?
yeah,
However, the difference being sometimes is access, right? So we don't have equality in access to. If you look at Indigenous, Black, to us LGBTQ plus populations, depending where you live in the country, it's not equal access to supports once you have them as well. And that's part of the work that we do at Jack.org, and why when it's led by Youth for Youth, it's a little easier to do that organically across the country to make sure those supports are there, because you're not depending on actual physical buildings or staffing. It's young people helping young people.
yeah. And the stats are quite staggering, Michael, like in terms of mental health in our youth. Youth mental health in Canada, it states on the website, has been in decline for over a decade. More young people than ever before living with depression, anxiety, and a sense of helplessness. That's scary. And this isn't good. I mean, so where do we begin to heal? Is it at home? Is it in school? Is it in our religious institutions? Or do we begin to focus on the social issues and revamp how we live, moving maybe away from tech or social media into nature and more community? Like, where do we need to start in order to get the healing happening?
It's a great question, right? Because I think quite often with any complex problem, and this is a complex issue, we're looking for that. Here's the answer. We're like exercise or stop social media or ban AI and it's, a little bit of all of those things, right? But to start is starting to have the conversations. So if we look at working upstream before the stuff happens, how do we work upstream to have people have healthy conversations around mental health that are impactful and support, right? So that's what we do a little bit of, and reducing that stigma too. Because ultimately, I think many people who experience mental health challenges think that's something that happens to someone else, someone who's not strong, someone who doesn't have and it could present itself at really any time in different periods of your life. But how do you have those conversations? It's a little more normalized now that people understand this is an issue, but how do we talk about it, right? Whether it be I see a friend suffering, whether I'm a parent and my child is not showing up how they normally do, whether I'm a coach and I see my athletes aren't showing up how they used to, whether I'm an employer now. And we see that, David, you talked about, young people aged 25 to 29 in the workplace right now are showing up a little differently. They've been through COVID. They've gone through a period of isolation and loneliness. They are the unhappiest they've ever been, according to the happiest scale, right? And so they're taking health leaves at work. They're calling in sick. And so what ultimately we have unhealthy workspaces. Young people aren't being successful, and our nation's productivity is dropping, right? So again, if you're not just focused on health, poor mental health is costing our country $180 billion, right? Poor
Whoa.
mental health a year. And if we don't take serious steps in the next 15 years, I believe it will balloon to $225 trillion, right? So we have to take steps to create healthier workspaces, not just for the health of our nation, but also for the health of our economy too.
Yes, I totally agree. And Gallup poll, people came out in April with their annual report on workplace engagement, and in North America, Canada, and the U.S., it dropped even more from last year. So young people just aren't engaging, and they don't want the responsibility of leadership or management. You know, they kind of like want to survive the day, and yeah. Now it states too on your website that 1.25 million young people require mental health counseling each year in Canada. That's a lot. I mean, and just over half, 725,000, are not getting that mental health that they need. Why is that? Is that stigma of you're weak, you're not good enough? Is that the thing that's causing those numbers to be in play, Michael?
Well, I mentioned before, right? We're a crisis built system. So we're
Mhm.
waiting for people to go into crisis. So when you talk about getting the services you need, if we don't do something ahead of time, we're never going to have, I don't think we will ever have the capacity to serve everyone that goes into crisis. So it begs the question that Jack.org asks, what if they didn't go? What if we could reduce that number of people waiting for services simply by having those conversations early and giving them some tools, young people, parents, everyone that supports young people, managers across the country to actually have those conversations because sometimes, David, it could be, a friend says to you, hey, David, you're not showing up how you used to.
Mhm.
What's going on? And don't tell me you're fine. And then you like, whoa, someone noticed, someone cared. I'm not alone. And that could be enough. Okay. I've got a friend and a buddy in this and I can talk about it. I'm good. And sometimes they'll say, well, this is causing me I'm paralyzed by this. And they're like, all right, we need to get you some help. So let's call Kids Help Phone or let's get you, that kind of thing early on. Or let's link you. Let's talk to a trusted parent or friend and that a trusted adult that can support us through this, right? And that could be enough. Not everyone goes into it. We just can't, the healthcare system, as we know across the board, can't deal with that. I mean, the other piece too is that if you look at physical health versus mental health and where we put our resources, you look at those staggering numbers, but yet only like 90% of our healthcare budget goes directly to physical health, and mental health is largely underserved and under-supported, right? So we have to start seeing them as equals in the healthcare system and treating them and putting the resources into that, or we won't relieve those numbers going forward. And I mean, the other piece too I talked about is access. If you talk to, my kids grew up in Toronto, so when there's challenges, we had a variety of different, if you're savvy, it's still not easy to navigate, but if you're savvy, there's some services there. But if you're in small town Ontario, right? Orono, Ontario, like where are you going to go? And if your nearest neighbor is 3 kilometers away, like, and you don't have access or transportation to, like, how does that look, right? So it's not equal across our country too, or northern Canada, where you're a little more spread out and there's different things happening too.
Yeah. You know, it's like where do we start? So does this mean that this need to change? Maybe we need to change the school curriculum to include mental wellness, learning and skills that one needs to succeed in this very interesting society we live in. Like, do we need to start at the school system? Is that a good place to look and change the curriculum to add in that mental health component?
I feel like you're setting me up in a good way because that absolutely is. So Jack.org, of course, we have programs in schools. It's a chapter by students for students in schools, in high schools, universities, colleges throughout Canada, right? Where we create spaces for young people to talk about it. But on the curriculum piece, what happened during COVID was parents were going to teachers and saying, what do we do? What do we do? And teachers were like, that's not my bag. Like, that's not what I do. It's not, how do I do this? And so Public Health of Canada worked with Jack.org. We developed something called the Ed Hub. And so for teachers grade 9 through 12, if I want to integrate mental health conversations into my classroom, there's free resources on our website that work with the current curriculum by teachers for teachers to do that, because it is part of your day-to-day, whether you want to or not. And how do you do that in a safe and effective way, not being an expert? And just recently, PHAC stepped up and gave us more funding, and we developed more current pieces that we put in there around what's facing young people in the world today, what's causing mental health distress, like climate change, et cetera.
Yeah.
But yes, schools play a huge part, David, because at one point or another, every kid's in school. So if you want to get to the kids, go through the schools. I mean, but schools also face the challenge of everyone wants to go through schools, and they, their core business is education. So what do you let in, what do you don't? It's a balancing act.
It is, and I feel we need to bring in, life education as well as the math and science and English. We need to have lifestyle education, so that that kids coming out of high school or university have those skills to exist in a more healthy, balanced way. Now, young people in Canada, they are in a state of crisis, and many are struggling alone in it, right? They're suffering by themselves. I don't want to talk to anybody, it's my own journey. And yet, Jack.org is taking action, to change that. And what are then some of the key initiatives that you have going on this spring and summer? Because I notice you have a bike ride and other, programs that I'll get to in a few moments. But yeah, what kind of programs are you, working on this spring and summer? And then also, what are the impacts that you're seeing with this kind of programming?
For sure. And impact matters. Data matters. It's not what we know, it's what we can prove. I'll
Hmm.
tell you this kind of the key theme in everything that we do, David, is having someone young people can relate to. So if you or I, despite our youthful appearance, get up and start talking to young people about mental health, sometimes it's just noise, right? It's like talking to your kids, whatever, man. Like, whatever, boomer. And then I have to correct them and say, not a boomer. But um, but it's because how can this bald old guy relate to what I'm going through, right? And I'm being funny, but it's true. It's right. But if my peer, if someone I looks like me, sounds like me, has gone through recently the same things, my age, it's like it's could be my friend, shows vulnerability and talks about their mental health journey and how they've come out. They've got strategies in place to support it. It lands better. So everything we do, that's what makes us a little different. Everything's rooted in relativity of youth to youth. Everything Jack.org does when we say, hey, we got a great idea for a program, we have something called the Youth Voice Council, 25 young people that we pay to be part of this council that represent young people across the country. When we think from marketing to programming, is this a good idea? They give it that kind of young people stamp of approval. Like this makes sense. This tracks, that kind of thing. So coming up this spring, we've just released, as I said, some new pieces to that Ed Hub that are current relative pieces of what's happening in this world for educators to talk about in the classroom in an impactful way to blend with the curriculum. Every year, we look to hire, we have a group of about 100 people that are Jack Talk speakers, 18 to 25. And what it is, if you've got some lived experience, whether it's you or someone in your family or a good friend that you've worked through around young people's mental health that you'd like to share, and it's very therapeutic when you do that, you can apply to be a Jack Talk speaker where we train you and pay you for 2 days of intensive training, which is really cool training. It's effective. It'll help you in life. And then during the year, Jack Talk speakers go out to schools, events, anywhere will be listened and talk about their journey in a safe and impactful way, right? How do you do that without triggering or doing that for yourself or others? And what we found is that when a Jack Talk speaker goes to a school, 6 out of 10 young people walk out of that and are more likely to talk about their mental health journey, right? Because so much showed vulnerability. You have an athlete up there who's like, what? That guy was like had mental health challenges. He's a big and strong dude. Yeah, that happens too, right? But you don't guess that, and it doesn't happen often enough. And that's some of what we're seeing, right? Going forward. And so we have our Jack Talks program. We pay young people to do those talks. It's a job. It's great. It's great experience. And then we'll be recruiting for our Youth Voice Council. We do have the Jack Ride coming up on May 23rd. And really the idea behind that is people getting in motion. It is a bike ride. That's what started Jack.org in the beginning, was just a memorial bike ride that turned into Jack Ride. And now you have 800 people that gather to this big ride that raises a lot of money for the programs we do. And also, it's just a day of hope and healing because you have 800 people riding together that, or walking together, or whatever, getting in motion that somehow, some way have been affected by mental health. And that person beside you is still standing, still there, still moving forward. So it is that day of healing, and a great message to say we are in this together and you're not alone.
I like that thanks, Michael. I like the fact that you shared one of the key programs and things that you do at jack.org around youth mental health, and that's the notion of hubs and youth to youth talks. Like that peer counseling, I feel, is more important, as you alluded to old guys like us with no hair. But touting the importance of good, mental wellness. What do you love about that service model of youth and peer counseling and training youth to be, on the forefront of mental health education, in schools and in community? What do you love about that? Because I feel it's a really interesting service model.
Well, the peer-to-peer model is great because A, it's sustainable, right? We're not adding, we tried to put staff in every school in Canada. I mean, you never have enough money, right? And then they leave and change. So it's organic in its growth. Young people every year, new young people are coming in that are interested, can train and build, and they're doing it for each other, young people for young people. So that massive ecosystem continues to grow year after year after year organically, and can do that because they're all doing it for each other, by each other, right across the country. So that's really cool, right? So it's a sustainable business model in a sense that the growth is through young people supporting young people, not adding staffing and doing that. Our staff provides some guidance, but we don't need to increase. It doesn't, even if we add 70 chapters in a year, our staffing doesn't necessarily have to increase. They're just giving them guidance in dollars and helping them kind of along the way get things started, and any questions that they have, right? So to me, I think that model is pretty cool. It can grow, and again, it has credibility because it's by the young people are driving it in the school. It's not a teacher. It's not someone telling you have to. They're doing it because they want to, and their friends are driving that too, right? So it's a pretty cool movement that way, and it's sustainable over time.
And what do you see from a program like that? What's some of the magic that happens with, the youth hubs and peer-to-peer sort of counseling? Like what, maybe a success story or something that you've seen that you go, wow, I'm really proud of this.
Well, there's a young man, Tanner Bergsman, who is a young autistic leader. And Tanner, I just was reading this morning, he gives TED Talks now. He came through our Jack Talks program, and he's saying that, and I'm going to not get it exactly right, but he said the things that used to drag him down now are his fuel moving forward, meaning the things that used to really, because he pushes that forward, he tells his message, he uses those things that used to scare him as motivation to drive further and talk to others. And when you get up there and talk in front of others to share your story the first time, it's terrifying. What if people, give you blank stares or don't react? And when you get the reaction afterwards of that talk of even one young person coming up and saying, thank you so much. I've really been struggling, and now I have the motivation to move forward, to ask for help, to maybe become a Jack Talk speaker, to talk to my parents, to do that. And that could change someone's life. It could actually save their life. Not to be over dramatic, but if you're thinking, because crisis can lead to youth suicide, which is, like I said, the second largest cause of death for young people in Canada. So empowering them to have that kind of impact is really powerful, and to take control of we say on it, like, own your own journey, is that you take ownership over it. You're now in control. You're not, and you feel that. You're like, all right, and that's a good feeling, right? And so you see that. I see Tanner now, who's really now spiraled out into his own business. He's traveling all over the world. He's speaking internationally about his struggles and how he came through. And, not only, a late diagnosis of autism, and where that and how did that affected him, and all the different aspects to mental health, right? We have young people talking about body image, small town mental health, athletes, Black mental health, um, and we have academics who have put so much pressure on themselves that they've almost lost it all. because it's put so much stress on their mental health, and how they've got to work through that through, the power of peer-to-peer support and getting the help they needed.
How do we manage that pressure? Because I feel like, the pressure to perform in school or in athletics or, in other parts of our life are really evident. And sometimes it's hard to live up to expectations and pressure. And there's then turns into a fear or shame and guilt if you're not keeping up. So how do we shift that, in the work that you're doing and just in our day-to-day lives, be it if we're at school or we're in work or athletics, or how do we start to shift those elements of fear, guilt, shame for that the pressure can bring if we're not keeping up.
I think what we say at Check.org is it's really about being there for one another. And so we have a young Jack Talk speaker who now is in med school, Samara McBool, and she talks a lot about how, in high school she was in every club available, and she was put, and it just, it drove her to seclusion. So when she was in, you know, she was really secluding herself, not herself. And when someone noticed that, a friend was like, "Hey, let's go for a walk and let's go talk," and kind of say, "Hey, here's what." And then it was almost like giving permission to young people, to her. You don't have to do that. Like, where's that getting you? How are you feeling? You have permission not to always be everything to everyone, and it's going to be all right. So it's being there for one another, and we give the tools, and we can, like, we have something called the Be There certificate, which really
Mhm.
just helps people, with these 5 simple kind of principles around how you can have those conversations and start the conversations to be there for one another when you see people are struggling. Because some people thrive and it won't bother them. They'll keep doing it. But others, it becomes too much and it changes kind of social behavior. And you see them withdrawing from society. And so if we could be there for one another, and allow ourselves the grace and to step away and even take a rest and say, I can't at this time, what a difference it would make.
Yeah. We've been talking about going into schools and universities and colleges, and I spoke to a teacher and a colleague of hers about money challenges that young people are having. And the number one challenge with money is they're getting into debt, and they're getting into debt by gambling.
Mm.
So they're into not mainstream gambling, but those side bets. Well, if this happens, you'll get, and then they're getting into debt they have an attitude, young people, and these are high school students, so they're, younger. They're getting into debt by overspending. They have this, well, the way society is going, I might as well buy that nice sweater for $500, right? So, and that's causing a lot of angst and pressure and depression because they're in it now. They're financially the burden and the stress and the pain is really super high for young people. So are you taking on those kind of issues as well in terms of the peer-to-peer support? Because it's not something that we think of when we hear that kids are, struggling and challenged.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just another one of those layers too, David. The legalization of gambling, this online. I mean, the advertising, they do it for a reason, and who it's directed at. And young people, we made it so easy to access and do this, and we're digging them in. It's addictive behavior, right?
Yeah.
Um, so that again wears in your mental health, because when you can't see a way through, when you say, "Oh my God, like this, I'm so in debt, or I owe people a lot of money, or what am I going to? I'm so ashamed. I'm a loser. I'm not a winner." Like that kind of thing, right? And it is, again, I just keep going back to, because we don't do, like, we're not clinical, or we don't do crap, but it is early on for young people to see those signs in your friend. That's like, wait a second, man, like, why? Like, what are you doing with that sweater? Like, where did he get that? How you like? And you're saying, okay, so what are we going to do? This is a complex problem. This is not the end. You're young. There's a way through. Let's see what we could do. Let's navigate the system. Let's work together. Let's talk to a trusted adult. This is just the start. This is the beginning, not the end. And so it really is, and that's and on our podcast, Jack Amplified. What we do is we can every other week we run this podcast. We tackle things like that with young people coming on who have had lived experience around whether it be body image, whether it be bullying, all the different things that lead to mental health distress, right? And problem gambling is just a new layer because it has become so accessible and so accepted as, and so there are some positives, like there's, use of alcohol
Hmm.
is declining, which is great. But then there's
Yeah.
these other things that are kind of taking the space of that, right? That are equally distressing. So how do we support young people right from the beginning? When people isn't showing up, when people aren't showing up the way they normally do, they're withdrawing, you don't see them more, there's behavioral changes, whether it be gambling or something happening at home, family disruption, whether it be money, whether it be, this is where we have to be there for one another and step in and really learn those, what we call the Be There certificate as five. And not my idea. Like, it was beautifully designed in that, hey, this is mental health first aid, which is awesome. But this is like, how do we even start the conversation? Right? Because we're scared to. What if I say the wrong thing to David and he gets mad? What if I say the what ifs? So if I can go to you and say, David, you're not showing up how you used to, and I'm telling you this because I care and I want to be here for you and I want to listen. And I listen to you, and then I show that I care, and they've got one person in their corner, that could be a huge game changer. And then I also know how to do that without, when it gets too heavy, I have to know my own boundaries and know my own strength. I can say, okay, this is too much. We need to speak to an adult, or we need to get you some help, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to be there with you to navigate through the system, right? So these five golden rules that you walk through, and it's beautifully done. If you go to our website, jack.org, look up the Be There certificate. It's a free resource for parents, for kids. It takes you about 3 hours. You don't have to do it straight up. You can come back to it and you get a certificate out of it. But it's by young people for young people. It's really well done through videos and little quizzes. It's amazing. And it's a way to start those conversations. What we found out recently, David, through a poll, through some work we did with UNICEF, we asked 4,000 young people, who do you go to for informal support first? 60% of young people said, I will go to a parent, a friend, or a partner first. And so how do we prepare those parents, partners, friends to have those conversations? Because they might not come back to you if you don't answer the bell, right? Especially parents. Hey, this is a big opening for you. Be prepared to not just try and fix it like I did when made that mistake, but to truly just listen and be there and follow those steps.
Yeah. And just, that program, I just want to reiterate the importance of it. Oh, one other thing in talking to that teacher, the other part of that, and this is how it, mental health is a big issue, especially with high school students. She was alluding to the fact that the boys are more out there and more brash and bold, but the girls are quiet and silent. And I think, again, that's a self-esteem issue. You mentioned body image, you mentioned, other factors that go into that. And I feel like, for me, it really comes down to, we got to teach and talk about self-love and self-care in a more profound way, and make it, again, part of, if not the curriculum at school, just part of these, be there talks that your young people are doing. Would you agree with that, or?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that is this is how, especially with young women, get up there and talk about this is how I learned to love myself once again and be okay with not being perfect. I mean, it's a different world we talk about a lot, like online. That fear of missing out. It's what's projected by a lot of people online looks like the perfect life. Looks like they're having the time of their life when the best moments are captured there, and they may not even be real,
Yeah.
right? And then also the ability when you and I were growing up to bully, it was kind of face to face, right there. But now you can be a faceless coward and throw in, and just be mean online. And I can remember with my girls, you could have 100 positive comments and then one really mean-spirited one, and that would send my daughter reeling. How could they say that? Well, oh my God, because the self-esteem is so brittle, right? And so how do we build strong young people too? And for guys right now, for many, many years, we see that the federal government is now focused on a men and young boys health strategy because the focus was taken off for a long time because we were focused on different things. And now what we've seen is a deterioration of young men and young boys' health, both physical and mental, right, where we ignore it. And so what is that strategy? Well, it's early prevention, it's good mentorship. There's a bunch of things in there. But yeah, it's I think also there's a lot of talk about banning, David. Well, we got to ban social media, we got to ban this, ban that. And I think it's that kind of here's the answer, and there isn't one answer. Although I'm not like, from early ages, maybe we limit use to social media. But also, if you don't like the product, how are we not holding social media companies responsible to change and make it healthier and safer for young people to use this? Where's their accountability around that, right? With AI, and whether it be if they're going to use these tools regardless, we need to limit a bit. But also, how do we make these tools safer? And how do we have accountability for the people that are putting those things out there? It's a combination of all those things. And again, I'm just regurgitating what I've learned. I am not an expert, but I agree with that at the minute you say ban, it almost sometimes makes it more appealing.
Yeah, great insight and wisdom you're sharing. We're with Michael Braithwaite. He's the president and CEO of a great organization called Jack.org that's helping. It's really peer-to-peer support around mental health. I love that the Be There program where it is about peer-to-peer mentoring. And there's a certificate, there's learning, there's resources, all designed to provide, young people with the knowledge, skills, and confidence to safely support anyone who's struggling with their mental health, be it at school or in community I love the program. And yeah, may it continue to thrive. For sure. I have a few more questions. Um, Again, remember, for those listening, it's jack.org, and it's providing youth with spaces for connection and support. And I can't tell you the importance of support. I just went through a toe infection, Michael, and I'm on the tail end of it. And just to have a call or support or somebody saying, "Hey, how you doing?" makes a big difference, right? For sure. Um, the impact that the organization has through these talks and hubs, you've reached over 300,000 people, and 96% say these programs have helped them with their mental health issues. That's really quite amazing. And as you envision the future, what outcomes would you like to see have happen?
Well, ultimately, we were built on the thought of reducing youth suicide across Canada, and we haven't seen that, right? So I would love, to be talking with you in a few years to say, hey, every school or every with Jack.org programs in it has seen a reduction in the amount of attempts and people losing their lives to by suicide. That would be the outcome, right? Is like, can you? It's hard for me to fathom that we've got some, things like cancer and number two on that list of all these things is youth suicide. I mean, that is preventable. That is changeable. We could do more. We must be better. And to me, that if that drops out of the top 10, what a win, right? How many more young lives will we have thriving and doing great things? We've got to do more, and we've got to take that seriously. We as a nation, I know there's a bunch of groups looking for a national youth suicide prevention strategy, and we need to have that, right? We have now a hotline, suicide, national hotline, which is amazing. They've funded that, the federal government, but we have to do more because that is not something we're just stuck with. We can change that, and that's the outcome that we're looking for too. Because again, some of these numbers, I could say, well, we did this, and then people say, so what? So like, what is the end result of that? And some of those end results too, we're saying there's no longer waiting lists because We don't have as many kids going into crisis, right? People are getting the help they need. Canada is investing heavily in the mental health of our young people, not after crisis, but before, investing in in early intervention prevention, because quite often that's overlooked, right? Because sometimes too, like if you think, I always tell this story, David, that, all right, so we have a big fire, right? It's a crisis, and we put out the fire, and it's exciting, and we tell the story, we point at the smoke, and look what we did, right? Yay, we go clap. It's great news. But what if that fire never had to happen? If we
Mm.
had things in place, not as exciting because nothing happened, like, but you prevented that, right? So, sometimes it's not as newsworthy, but let's move away from that. We can't actually truly end and make big change if we don't invest in early intervention prevention. We'll just keep repeating. It's just repetitive, right?
Yeah. And suicide, the impact just on the family, alone, friends, a couple like a husband and wife, or a couple, the impact on your child, taking their life. I've seen it break up marriages because
Yeah,
the pain is so
100%.
great. They don't, like, a couple doesn't know how to deal with their pain, and then the guilt and the shame they have moving forward. So yeah, it's really,
There's nothing natural about a parent outliving their child, right?
yeah,
Regardless of how, it just
yeah,
really takes that toll. And then that whole thing that, how did I not know?
yeah,
How did I not know? How did I not know? How do you keep kind of, and it's so, because again, you could be the best parent in the world, and the Windlers are a wonderful supportive family with a lot of love. But, if that's misunderstood, if that person, for whatever reason, isn't able to share, that's not on parents that you could have done more, right? It's on kind of our whole society of how do we open up people to those conversations early on, like we do at Jack.org, to make that difference. And listen, the key to this too is partnerships. Jack.org is not the solution. We are a small part of that. We have a lane. And then there's wonderful folks at Kids Help Phone, CAMH, Youthdale, Unsinkable. There's Canadian Mental Health Research Association, CMHAs across the country. There's so many groups doing cool and innovative and amazing work that we all kind of play a part in this journey. And so, it is partnership that is really going to turn this around, and we got to stop duplicating things and supporting one another too.
I used to volunteer years ago. I started in the late '90s with the Kids Help Phone Foundation. And my goal is, I hope that my now 32-year-old daughter doesn't have to use it. And and it was born out of my pain. I lost my dad when I was 10, and that shaped me
Mhm.
in ways that impact my life today. With patterns and
Of course.
thoughts and beliefs and things that I need to heal and let go of. I've got a couple questions left. One is, we mentioned that you're big in the school system, but are you approaching religious institutions and community centers and libraries as well?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, right? Because not everything happens inside of schools. So we
Mm,
took our chapters program, and I say we, and I say I work with, good leaders surround themselves with people that are way smarter than them. And it doesn't take much. That bar's not high for me, but I do surround myself with really brilliant people and leaders at Jack.org, and the young people in the front lines, and they've done a champions program. So we work inside of community centers. We're looking to work with national partners like the YMCA, where young people gather with Big Brother. Yesterday I met with Jill from Big Brothers Big Sisters Canada, and how can we, like, so she was saying, the bigs, so the mentors for the littles, are saying, we're getting more complex young people, and I am not a counselor. I can't have that conversation. So we're saying to Jill, how do we have every big across and little across the country do the Be There certificate, so they can have those safe conversations, right? So it's pretty cool how you kind of get that out organically. You don't really have to net new something. It's just around where are the kids already. We've established, yes, the schools, but they are at the YMCA's and they are at Boys and Girls Clubs across the country and Big Brothers, Big Sisters doing that. And scouts, Girl Guides. We need to work with coaches who have access so to do those things and set up those clubs, but also have Jack Talk speakers there. And this is the newer piece that we're doing, David, is that we have seen that 25 to 29-year-olds, like I talked about, are not doing well in the workplace. So what are we going to do about that? Well, if you talk to a manager and they're like, hey, I'm not touching that. If I say the wrong thing, I could lose my job. Right. Well, so how do we give them those? And HR is like, well, I don't know how to do that. And so we direct people, usually when they're suffering with mental health, through very well-intentioned EAP programs, right, that are very underused, right? Because the first stop usually isn't counseling. How do you have? So if a manager could say to David, you know what? I really like having you on this team. And I see you're not showing up how you used to. Like, talk to me about that. And you create this safe and you have that conversation and it gets to, you're going to see that you're creating healthier workspaces, just showing that you care. And then people are going to show up more and you're going to build this kind of knowledge of this employer actually cares beyond throwing a program at me. They've invested in their managers. So we actually, when you talk about entrepreneurship, we're like 98% fundraise revenue at jack.org, but we're doing this as an earned revenue model where there are dollars in training in HR and that kind of thing. And so we're working with employers now in this earned revenue where we'll train, say, 40 people at the same time to be there, certify them in person, and they all walk away with those core basic skills to start the conversation. We're looking at working with labor unions because we know that people going into construction trades have a higher level of mental health distress. So how do you change that from the outside in that we'll work with them before they even start the construction and pre-apprenticeship programs like Building Up and Construct, and other programs like that across the country that are wonderful, where they're actually learning to have those conversations with their peers and the managers and people in construction that have been there for years who are afraid to have those conversations. So we're changing that. And so outside of schools, going into all those different areas, trying to increase that ecosystem. And then again, working with, Sports Canada and Canadian Tire Jumpstart to say, how do we maybe fund this for every coach across the country? Ideas like that people are very open to.
Yeah, I love that. And you mentioned trades, and one of the biggest challenges that owners of the trades kind of companies that are out there, the biggest challenge is they can't find people, especially the young people, and they're not very well trained coming in, so it's hard to keep people. So, and I love the fact that you're going into companies as well, and I talked about that Gallup study, which I can send you offline,
Yeah.
about lower employee engagement. So that's one way to engage is. I feel like that's all it's missing. I feel like our society for the past 5 years, 6 years, has become crueler in a way. And I feel if we're there to really support people and care for our people and, not really coddle them, but just to support, to challenge, to care, I think, where we work, where we learn, where we hang out, is going to be a lot nicer. Just a couple last questions. You mentioned your funding model, and one thing I really like, because when I did my work with the Kids Help Fund, and I donate every year, is that they never went after government money. They were all self-funded and mostly corporate donations. I used to work on their bowl-a-thon, and Alt Dairies was there, and Bell, and Bank of Montreal, some major funders. So what do you feel like? What drives the companies that support your work? What drives them? And what are a few companies that really stand out and make an impact?
I think it's human connection. Before I answer that, Joe, I also want to go on. So you talked about the importance of human connection, and we've lost that over time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a brilliant man, Pete Bambachi. He is the lead of Genwell, and Pete is doing this kind of human connection project across Canada, trying to get people to talk to one another, getting people together in person. He'll do these days of talk to strangers. So he'll get people to stand out and just strike up conversations. And young people that are with him are like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, why would I ever?" Because they don't, know a young person. When my daughter calls me, my 25-year-old, I know something's wrong because if it's not a text, this is like an SOS, and it shouldn't be that way, right? So Pete is doing, Genwell, check them out. Like he's doing incredible work. He's building momentum because human connection matters, and that's what we've lost so much of that over the past 5 to 10 years. So it matters.
Mhm.
But going back to what you just talked about, refresh me. What was the
The
question?
funding model, like
Yeah,
what
funding model. So,
drives, your
but
supporters.
yeah, and there's some great, like, so Green Shield works with us. They're an incredible partner, and they like Green Shield is not saying we want to get into your lane and provide, and they do. They do a lot of free. Like, listen, if you need mental health counseling and you're in university, Green Shield steps up and provides that, and gives that to you, and they do incredible work. I mean, they're a nonprofit themselves, but they are a convener of bringing us all together and having these important conversations and pumping a lot of funds into new and innovative ideas. They're like, hey, what else you got? What's new and different? How are we going to change this? And I love that in a funding partner. They're incredible in bringing us all and convening those things and getting us to work closer together. They play a great role there, what they do. And so that's pretty cool. Bell Let's Talk, of course, across the country has always been very influential in giving us the resources to do that. They're a great partner. RBC is really invested, and they've just launched a new kind of piece around sustainability of nonprofits, and mental health plays a part in that. But listen, I don't want to let government off the hook here. And I think quite often we do. If you let everyone else pay for it, government's all right with that. But it really, they're mandated to look after our health or education, things like that. So let's not let them off the hook. In fact, Jack.org, I want government to come to the table. I want them to be not the whole solution, but a part of that. I'd love to see our percentage of government funding go up. And to do that too, you can't make it a one and done. These aren't one and done solutions. You have to invest heavily over years through different governments. So I'd like to change our model there too. And I like the earned revenue piece too. I think if we're really going to make change happen in our sector, in mental health or anywhere in the you have to be creative, innovative, thoughtful, and entrepreneurship and social enterprise plays a huge part of that. When you can drive in your own money and gives you greater control, and you could do the things that need to be done, not just following the mandate of others, it's incredible. So there's a lot of funders now, corporate and others, who are really good that way to say, hey, at the end of the day, if you're doing social good, I don't need a 400-page report on how you're doing this, because that's just going to take your time and effort away from the kids and doing that. And so we were so fortunate to have such good corporate supporters through the Jack Ride and through what we do. Lululemon's been a huge supporter because they're about wellness, right? And they see
Yeah.
mental wellness, right? And then so many companies that get it and want to be part of the solution. And you know what? I'm missing some, and I'm gonna be mad at myself afterwards for the ones that have really
But
stepped
go on
up.
the website, it's there.
Yeah. But there are and I love the work that Green Shield's doing. I can't say enough about that. They've really stepped up as a partner and always are looking to fill the gaps.
They're a great company. I used to work with the city of Toronto running an entrepreneur program. It started out for youth, but then it morphed into like, okay, let's have everybody. And Green Shield was our, healthcare company, that we went to. They were great. They were very cutting edge in terms of the programming and the services that they offered employees. This is my last question, okay? And you gotta, get your crystal ball out. It's 5 years from now. What positive outcomes would you want to see happen as far as the work you are doing at Jack.org? Like maybe
Well,
one or two positive.
number one is that youth suicide has dropped into the top 10 causes of death across our nation.
Yeah.
That's just unacceptable to me, and we should never accept that, right? So that's number one. Number two, I'd like to see 1 million. Right now, we have 100,000 people that are Be There certified. I'd love to see 1 million Canadians Be There certified. What an impact if we had 1 million Canadians that could talk to each other about mental health in a safe and effective way. That would be really cool. And Number three, I'd like to see government invest heavily out of this young boys and uh, men and young boys health strategy. What early themes are mental health and early intervention prevention. That strategy, they're doing the research now. They should have the results of that strategy, the research gathering by the end of June. And then I can't wait to see what investments are going to be made. That's my hope, that some serious investments are going to be made long term in young people and their mental health across this country. The wealth of our nation, the health of our nation depends on it.
And it is, there's a tie-in, you know, we talked about mental health. It's the mind-body connection. It's all connected. If you're going through a health struggle, what's going on underneath? You know, what's the mental health? I mean, what's the wound you have to heal?
Yeah.
So it's really, you're doing amazing work. I got to thank you for this today. It was a great conversation. You're a class act. I'm glad I don't know how we connected on LinkedIn, but I'm really happy we did. If we do want to reach you, where do we tap in?
Anytime, any place, Michael at jack.org. Look for me on LinkedIn. I love to connect on there. I love that community. Reach out to us at jack.org. If you're interested, a young person that might want to be a speaker, that you might want to volunteer on our board. We have a new thing called Friends of Jack, where it's kind of like a think tank that we get really smart people together virtually 4 times a year and say, here's a big problem we're facing. What do we do? And we look for your real ideas to help push it through. Who doesn't have 4 hours a year? And I'm probably going to be tapping you, David, for that, right? To be a part of the solution. So do that. Reach out to me anytime. If you think you want to be a guest on Jack Amplified around a specific part of mental health and something facing Canadians, I would love to have you on.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thank you for this, Michael. That was Michael Braithwaite. He joined us from his home office in the GTA. Great discussion today, and tip of the iceberg. There's more to unpack, I'm sure. Next week on Your Big Venture Zone, join guest Sandra Finkelstein as we talk success strategies and how Gen Zs can embrace leadership roles. So in the meantime, have a great week, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Big Venture Zone. Remember on our YouTube channel to like, comment, share, and get in touch and get involved too in this discussion we had today with Michael Braithwaite. So Michael, once again, thank you, and just have a great week.
Thank you, David.